transportation, because there are going to be some transportation savings in this, particularly in the urban areas. We work on connected networks of trails and developing trail segments that can be used for active transportation to get from your house to a school, or from your home to the local grocery store and back. And so fewer car rides does lead to some transportation savings, and then health, just the physical health benefits and the mental health benefits of more access to parks and open space and trails is very significant.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Active Towns channel. I'm John Simmerman, and that was Garry Merritt with the Great Springs Project that's happening right here in Central Texas, basically between Austin and San Antonio. And Garry really kind of gives a great overview of this exciting project. It's going to be nearly 100 miles in total, connecting 4 of the most important springs that exist naturally here in the Central Texas area. And it's a lot of fun. It's a beautiful concept, and it's wonderful to see 2 things happening: land being conserved and trail going down on the ground. Without further ado, let's get right to it with Garry Merritt. Garry, it's such a wonderful opportunity to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
So, Garry, I love to have my guests just introduce themselves, so I'll turn the floor over to you. Who is Garry Merritt?
So thanks, John. I'm Garry Merritt. I'm the CEO of Great Springs Project.
Fantastic. And where'd you grow up?
I'm from a small town in the Western Hill Country called Leakey.
Okay.
It's between Kerrville and Uvalde, right on the edge of the Edwards Plateau. The Frio River is on one side of my county, and the Nueces River is on the western side of my county. Some people may have been to Garnder State Park. It's 10 miles upstream from there, or Lost Maple State Park. We're about 15 miles west of there.
Wow. Okay, cool. So it sounds like the Hill Country is in your blood.
It really is. Yeah, my family's been in the Hill Country for generations. I grew up in that town of 500 people, and just spent all my outdoor time, all my growing up time outside and traipsing around, and have continued to the land to be a really important part of my life.
Yeah. And formal training, what sort of background and education do you have?
Yeah, after Leakey High School, I went to Rice University to do my undergrad, law school at University of Texas. Then I practiced law, corporate and real estate law, for 7 years in Houston, and then moved back to my little hometown of Leakey to open a law practice there, where I did a lot of real estate work, a lot of corporate work. And I also got involved in local government there, being our elected county attorney for 10 years and our elected county judge for 7 years, and that's Real County.
Oh, wow. Okay, fantastic. So you served as the Real County judge, which for those listening in and tuning in and watching this, Texas is a little different in terms of that elected official, with the judge name. Explain that.
Yeah, an elected county judge position in Texas is, if you like civics, it's really an interesting position because it is judicial. I was a black robe judge, and I presided over misdemeanor criminal trials and probate cases, juvenile cases, things like that. There is an executive function in that you are sort of like the CEO of the county and the point for a lot of those functions. And then there's some legislative work as well, in that you're presided over the Commissioner's Court, which has a little bit of rulemaking authority in Texas. You can adopt a few things. And so it has all 3 branches of government in one office. Yeah,
it's pretty fascinating. I was when I moved here, from Hawaii, I was like, wait a minute. They do what? It's a little bit of everything.
There is. And one just more thing about a county judge. In each of the counties, the county judges have all of the constitutional authority to do things, but not all judges exercise that. So one of the things you have to ask someone, if you know that they've been there or are a county judge, you have to ask them what authorities that they exercise. Because not all county judges are black robe judges. Some of them have other people do that. But for me, I like doing things, and so I did everything.
Right. So when did you start, getting really interested in the concept of land conservation and how does that kind of tie maybe into your personal life and how you like to, get out in the wilderness.
Yeah, I said before that being on the land was important to me, and it really was. I grew up in a small community with a lot of around me, and so for us, that's what we did for fun. We were outside and we were looking for swimming holes along the Frio River or the creeks. As kids, we would be on bikes or horses or on foot or whatever, just outside all the time. And so and all my family has worked on ranches, cutting cedar, driving trucks, working. And so being on the land is always something really important to me. Then working in real estate, you sort of look at and learn how to look at land with a certain viewpoint. But then when I became county attorney and then county judge, one of the things I worked on was to do some long-term planning for the county. Mm-hmm. And in my county, Riall County, our economy was driven by tourism. And so I was looking around and talking with folks and was thinking that natural resources there are our economic engine. That's our Toyota plant for San Antonio, or the Samsung that's going to be here just north of Austin. And so we started to build conservation resource protection into our long-term planning. I mean, right. We needed to have the river be clean so people would come back year after year, and have water in the river, and have the air be clean, and for people to see the cypress trees, because that's how people make their living.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull up the website here. And again, the organization is the Great Springs Project, and the website here is greatsprings.org. And it really, it says right here, it's the heart of Texas. Talk a little bit about what this project, is about, and we've got a little video that we'll pause and play, because I think it does a great job of really bringing it to life. But before we press play on that, I'll give you the floor and let you just kind of give us an intro to it.
So Great Springs Project is, for me, it's the project of my lifetime. It really pulls together everything that I'm good at and passionate about from a Texas perspective. It really is a big Texas-sized project. It has conservation at its core of protecting land over the recharge zone of the Edwards Aquifer between San Antonio and Austin, and protecting the four iconic springs that are in the Great Springs alignment. The San Antonio Springs, which is the Blue Hole at Incarnate campus in San Antonio, to Comal Springs, downtown New Braunfels, to San Marcos Springs, and then on to Barton Springs in downtown Austin. And so this protecting and connecting these four springs and doing it from a market-based transactional perspective, it's just everything that I love to do.
That's cool. Well, we'll get back to what you mean by market-based transactional and sort of the nuts and bolts of that. But let's give both of our voices a little bit of a break and give the audience a little taste of what it is this vision is all about.
It's no wonder why folks moved to the Texas Hill Country. It's one of the greatest places to live. Water magically springs from the earth and entire rivers are born. The land bursts with color and is teeming with life. Water defines who we are here, and our identity and history is tied to the Edwards Aquifer and four Great Springs. These springs and the rivers that flow from them are the soul of our cities. They connect us to nature, giving residents and visitors access to some of the best water recreation opportunities in the world. Barton Springs is the heart of Austin. San Marcos Springs gives birth to a river. Comal Springs is the largest spring in the Southwest. And the San Antonio Spring is the original source of the San Antonio River. These springs and thousands of others are connected underground by vast aquifers. The Great Springs Trail is the connection we need. A trail that runs through the land that defines who we are. Some of the trail is already established, and it's time we connect the dots. Trails make us healthier, and they make our towns, our cities, and our neighborhoods even better places to live. People live longer with access to nature, and trails show you to the wonders of the world. The Great Springs Trail is more than just a hike and bike trail. It will conserve a breathtaking part of Texas in the most quickly developing region in the United States. Some of the region has already been protected. But there is still a lot of work to be done. Yes, time is of the essence. This region of Texas is growing faster than any other. And if we don't conserve it right now, we're going to lose the very reason that we live here. Right now, we have the chance to make this dream a reality. Future generations won't. And it's not just people that will benefit. The hill country contains species found nowhere else, and is a migratory stopover on a continental scale. Water that falls here is captured by grass and soil, seeping into the land and into vast underground aquifers. These caves and passageways below us are so extensive that species have adapted to live here that are found nowhere else in the world. And when these aquifers are healthy, they bubble to the surface as springs. The magic of water is why we live here. Protecting these aquifers and springs is protecting who we are. Unfortunately, the recharge zone of these aquifers is exactly where we're developing. Our springs and our rivers are at risk. Already in the last 50 years, half of the major springs in Texas have stopped flowing during drought years. The time to act is now, before it's too late. The Great Springs Project is not just a great trail through this recharge zone. It will conserve the land that is crucial for our springs and rivers to survive. Our plan is bold. It must be. Join us.
Fabulous. If that doesn't inspire us all, I don't know what will. That's fantastic.
Well, thank you. I know this will be the world's shortest podcast, so thanks for having me. No, that really does say it all. It really does.
So a couple things, sort of resonated with me in watching these images. And one is that I'm privileged enough to live in a neighborhood where I have access to the green belt, the Barton Creek green belt, and within a very, very short, comfortable, safe ride, I can get on my bike and I can ride through the neighborhood on quiet residential streets. I can then jump on to a portion of the Butler hike and bike trail, and then I can make my way over to Barton Springs Pool, and then I actually lock my bike up there at Barton Springs Pool, and then I walk over to the trailhead and then go deep into the greenbelt. And just like that image of the person trail running, that's kind of my opportunity for recreation. That's what I do to try to stay sane, and my connection to the land, the earth, the area, nature in this neighborhood is I run. I go back in there and I run. There's a certain connection there for me, with that. And I see how valuable that is. But it was also mentioned in the video here is that there's this tension, there's this pressure of this is a desirable place. There is housing shortages, and there's this pressure to try to continue to build more housing and continue spreading further and further out. And yet, we have to find that balance, right? Because if it, like, as was pointed out in the video here, this is over some of those crucial aquifers and recharge zones. Talk a little bit about that tension and how you all are, relatively newcomers to the scene, helping to try to manage that.
Texas is a growing state. Our population is growing, our economy is growing, and so we do need more housing. We do need more places for people to work. And to live, but we also need more places for people to be outside. And I believe Great Springs Project, we believe that we can find that balance, and those two things that seemingly are at tension can work together. For us, the reason that we work in such a tight geographic area over the recharge zone of the Edwards Aquifer, slightly into the contributing zone between Austin and San Antonio, is where those springs are, and it's within our mission to protect them. But it's also to bring attention to the place and what the recharge zone of an aquifer means, and why it's important to be thoughtful and intentional about the way that we orient toward the land. And so with the same intentionality of developing single-family houses or commercial space, we should have the same intentionality for the way that we treat, for us, particularly the recharge areas of the aquifer and those four springs. So it's just bringing to people's mind that this is another thing that's really important that we need to be taken into consideration and actively working toward being successful at. We can be successful at adding more parks and open space and spring protection in this area as we're adding more houses and commercial.
Yeah. And I pulled up this slide that shows those an overview of those four critical springs and their locations. And this is a 100-mile spring to spring trail network that's in place. And to the point, I mean, it's right here in the description. It's a national park-sized corridor. This is massive. Who dreamt up this idea? What's the history of the vision of it?
Yeah. The vision comes from our board chairperson, Deborah Marin. She is from San Antonio, lived in Austin to go to the University of Texas, and then had made Austin her home. And for many years, she has thought about and visualized how to protect the springs, and particularly the recharge features that support those springs. For her, it was the idea of being active in transactions to do it. And so, she with some friends started to work around San Marcos Springs, especially a little under a decade ago, and they worked to move some land into conservation there to protect San Marcos Springs, and with great success, along with other folks around in San Marcos. That city has been really a bellwether for some intentional land conservation, and now there's almost a ring around San Marcos of 18 miles of protected lands, and it's remarkable and it's fantastic, and it's a great asset for that community. And so from that, Deborah Marin and some others formed the Great Springs Project, and then hired me, and we built a team and moved from an envision in the organization, just the vision of a connected trail plus land conservation, into planning it and then actual execution and transactions. And just to give a little perspective, when we talk about the recharge zone of the Edwards Aquifer between San Antonio and Austin, that's an area that's maybe 90 miles north-south, or all of southwest to northeast in the graphic there. And then maybe it's 30 miles wide, roughly. So around 500,000 acres in that area. Of that, when we started the work, just over 50,000 acres was already in conservation in some way. Great conservation organizations working there along with, and you absolutely have to hold this up. The work of private landowners in doing conservation is amazing in this state. It is incredible. And there's been great conservation work done in this area. So when we say we want to add another 50,000 acres, we're talking about less than 10% of the available land in this corridor.
Right.
And so there's intentionality, but there's also perspective.
Right. It's interesting too, is that In the video, it also sort of alluded to climate and droughts. And in thinking to, on those days when I feel good and I make it really far into the green belt, I know that I'm able to find one flowing spring that is still, is guaranteed to still be, coming out of the rocks. And given the fact that we had been until just recently, I mean, we got some rain recently when I was traveling out of the country, but yeah, we'd been in a pretty dry period, and pretty much there is no water in the creek, and that's the only spot I know that there's going to be some water, kind of trickling out of there. And from that, life happens. There's fish in there, there's birds that are attracted to that area. Talk a little bit about that part of this in terms of that connection of the health of the aquifer, the health of the land, the health of the springs, and climate.
So this part of Texas is amazing, and Edwards Aquifer particularly is incredible for it being an area that has very unique species, in some cases indigenous only to the Edwards Aquifer and the areas around it. You think of aquatic species that only live in the Edwards Aquifer, or non-aquatic species like golden cheek warbler, for example, that lives in this area. And so the work of doing conservation through public agencies like cities or counties, think about habitat conservation plans that they would do, or watershed protection plans that cities or counties or river authorities would do. You think about the work of private landowners to move land into conservation, particularly on the surface here around golden cheek warbler habitat, and then the work of the Edwards Aquifer Authority and the other river authorities like GBRA and Guadalupe Blanco River Authority and San Antonio River Authority and the Lower Colorado River Authority around species protection. There's a lot at play around the relationship and the protection of habitat that relates to water conservation and water resource protection that kind of underlies our mission at Gray Springs Project.
I also notice on this slide here, basically a nod to, the historical context of this area. Why don't you speak to this just a little bit?
We understand that we are among the current stewards of the idea of the connection of these four springs in the relationship to humans. What you're looking at there in this slide, kind of in the middle, that's a portion of the White Shaman rock art panel. This is along the Pecos River near the confluence with the Rio Grande, and it shows what some people believe and we believe to be these four springs connected. That panel ranges in age from 4,000 to 2,500 years old, and it's actually part of a massive rock art panel. The communities that you're looking at there in the map on the right side, they were built in those in particular locations because of the access to water from the springs. From San Antonio, when George Brackenridge, built his house there on the headwaters of the San Antonio River, to the city of New Braunfels built around Comal Springs, and on and on. So what we believe now, the work that we do is reflective of the work that's been done for millennia, and it represents what people really fundamentally understand, which is we do not exist as a people without being connected to and protective of our water resources.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that I think about when I think about these challenges and the tensions that exist here in this arena, in this area, is trying to encourage a vision of like a different land use pattern and plan. And we've been struggling here in the city of Austin to rewrite our land use code and to be able to really encourage there to be more people within walking and biking distance, to meaningful destinations, and being able to hopefully take a little bit of that pressure off of that continuous sprawl of housing, trying to gobble up more and more of this precious land that we're trying to conserve here. Talk a little bit about that and where, I know it's probably not core to your mission, but it's certainly adjacent to it.
Absolutely. In Texas, and particularly in these rapidly developing areas of Texas, the Hill Country and Central Texas, the fact that there is so little publicly accessible open space just resonates through so many of the decisions that get made. So for us, adding more parks and open space and trails is responsive to what people are asking for. When city parks and recs departments do surveys, or cities do surveys, and they ask people what do they want in their town, invariably more parks and more trails is at the very, very tops of those lists. So people are wanting these places to be outside. We saw that through the pandemic, as we did safe streets to give people more places to be outside. We see that in our great Texas state park systems, where there's just so much engagement and so much use. We see lines like in Enchanted Rock going down the highway to get in there, and reservation systems, which are necessary now because people it's just challenging to find these great places to be outside. And so adding more parks and open space is important for quality of life, for the reasons that we want to live in the Hill Country. We want to live in Central Texas. It's to enjoy, just like you get to enjoy the Greenbelt in Austin because it's close to your house. We need to have these places close at hand for people. We have in our corridor, I drive up and down and I talk with and work with people in every community. And we have people from one community where there are not enough parks and trails, and they have to get in their car and they drive on I-35 15, 20, or 30 minutes to get to the next town so that they can go to a park or be on a trail. And when they finish that, then they get back in their car and they have to drive back to their home. We think that by working together, by listening at a local level, finding those opportunities for more parks and trails in their own community, we're making those communities better and stronger.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is that pressure to, be out, having to feel like you have to get into a car to be able to go to a park, and then that puts pressure on the park area and the trailheads to have massive amounts of parking. It's just this, it's a very, very unsustainable cycle. And I've had the opportunity to have a representative from the Trust for Public Land, on the podcast before. And we talked a little bit about the 10-minute walk campaign of being able to ensure that there is a park or a trail or a linear park or something like that within a 10-minute walk of everybody, within a community. And I think that's an incredible and important factor. But I wanted to pull up this slide because I think that it's something that a lot of people don't appreciate, is that trails in all shapes and forms, pathways and trails, whether they're paved or unpaved, are in fact drivers of economic benefit. Talk a little bit about this from your perspective.
Yeah, this is really important to our conversation with all of the communities and constituencies in our project area. For me, I have a background in local government, and I understand if you're asking for public financial support or public investment in a project, it's important to talk about the rate of return of using those public funds. No different from if you were asking for an investment on the private side. You have to explain and have a rate of return for that to receive certain investment. So the economic impact, the business growth, we've got economic impact studies that reflect the economic impact of this trail. We can point to the economic impact of other regional trails, like the Razorback Greenway in Northwest Arkansas is a great example of a one-time $30 million investment with some additional investments along the way that's had outsized economic impact for those communities. We could have the same conversation about other trails, regional trails around the country, and the economic impact that they have. But then thinking about it on a very, very local level, not just bringing more people in to visit your community and then leaving, the impact that they have with your local businesses, to attract new businesses, to attract and retain employees, to provide that great community feel that makes people want to stay in a community and engage and work in that community and spend their money in that community. And then just the value to us as a state and to our economy of protecting the water in the aquifer, having these open spaces and all the economic benefits that flow from that, from flood mitigation to water quality protection to habitat protection for species. Trails, parks, and open space are the lowest cost, highest rate of return infrastructure that you can build from a local government perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that goes back to, doing what we can on our land use pattern too, to be able to have, more people being able to access that and try to conserve and preserve that land so that we don't have that same pressure that continually goes there. So this is interesting. So you've got some numbers that you put together for a total annual benefit. Walk us through what's going on here.
Sure. So I know that a trail guy talking about rates of return sounds wonky, but the reality is that there are all kinds of priorities that are out there and without money toward projects, all you have is a vision. So someone smarter than I am has said that conservation without money is just conversation, right? No money, no mission. And so this is an important part of it is how does your project, how does a trail project, how does a park and open space project rise in priority with all the other priorities that cities have, from a transportation and public safety and physical health, like all the things that cities need to spend money on, or counties need to spend money on, or private investment needs to spend money on. Why is your project important? And so part of the way we make that case is by talking about these things that aren't at the front of the mind. So this slide represents that we, at the beginning, on the idea of a 100-mile trail in this corridor, what would be the economic impact of that trail? So just under $56 million per year, just in those four categories that are listed there. So the economic line is increased hotel occupancy taxes and sales taxes, people coming to visit. The land and water is somewhat of the value of some water quality protection, but it does not. That does not include the value of water in place in the aquifer. Transportation, because there are going to be some transportation savings in this, particularly in the urban areas. We work on connected networks of trails and developing trail segments that can be used for active transportation to get from your house to a school, or from your home to the local grocery store and back. And so fewer car rides does lead to some transportation savings. And then health, just the physical health benefits and the mental health benefits of more access to parks and open space and trails is very significant. Again, this was on the idea of a 100-mile trail. We're going to be working on this and looking at it more closely now that we have the actual proposed alignments for the trail segments. And I expect that we'll have also some better data sets, and that this number will change dramatically when we look at it more closely.
Yeah, man. Well, you're talking my language here with active transportation and health. That's fantastic. What's our biggest challenge in seeing this thing through?
Before I said yes to Great Springs Project, I thought the biggest challenge would be to actually find the alignments where you could build the trail for 100 plus miles in the middle of two of the most rapidly developing counties in the United States and two anchor cities that are growing at a massive rate, San Antonio and Austin. But once we figured out we could find the alignments, then the next challenge was, can you build a coalition that it's going to take to get this done? And you have to, we thought about that, and we realized that this has to be about everyone. It really has to be a place for everyone in this. And it becomes just a big Texas-sized project, a lot of ways to say yes to it. So that wasn't the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge we face right now is that there is just not many places in Texas where people can experience the relationship of private property and public access in ways that benefit the private property. So we believe very, very strongly in private property rights. And one of the things that we believe in is by connecting private property to public access, it can make your private property better, stronger, more marketable, more valuable, more usable. But because people don't have that experience in Texas, because we have so little publicly accessible space, it's just a lot of one-on-one conversations with private landowners, listening to their questions and understanding their concerns, and then helping them to see the opportunity that would come to them with this kind of a transaction. I'm encouraged by it. I'll say that I'm very encouraged by it. As a Texan, I'm really encouraged by it. But it takes time, and it takes a lot of individual conversations.
Right. And I imagine funding is another part of it. So we'll pull up the funding slide, because I know that most of the audience is going, yeah, but where are you going to get the money?
Right. Yeah, so the money. So what you're looking at on the slide here are the sources of funds for the public side of the investment. And we really look at three buckets. We look at public funds like these that can come about in a variety of ways. So for every one of our projects, we'll be working with a project partner, again, whether it's a city or a county or even a private landowner, to see if there's some public funds that can help be contributed toward the project. Another bucket of money, though, is private investment. So if there's an opportunity to either do a small amount of development on a piece of property, working with that landowner, supporting the work that landowner is doing, or transitioning the ownership of that property to a private investor that will undertake those kind of activities that do primarily conservation and generally trail, and then a potential for some development, which can mean a lot of different things. It can mean open space development, turning a large ranch into smaller but open space ranches, or it could be a small commercial development, even a small residential development with significant conservation. And then the third bucket of money is just the public support piece, philanthropy in all of its forms, because this is a big project that's transformative for Texas. We do not have anything like this in Texas, where we don't have right-of-way. This is not a rails to trails project. We're out there building a giant coalition and then working together to connect the trail.
Yeah, yeah. You do have a really cool slide in here that says that it only takes 25 feet to make a park. So I got to pull this up because I just had a chuckle about it. You know, yeah. In other words, it doesn't have to be that grand necessarily, and you had mentioned it earlier, is that there are some urban sections of this trail project that are actually paved trails. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's some that are in the wilderness, like the one that I run on, but there's plenty of it that is also this, and you mentioned it earlier, is that leveraging the opportunity of an all ages and abilities, active mobility, and that's one of the key drivers that really helps maximize the return on investment when you look at a pathway or a trail.
Yeah, we work to be as creative as possible on just how to include more parks, open space, and trail inventory into our geographic footprint. We have people that are on the ground looking at places like this one you see on the screen. They may be looking at culverts that go under highways, and there are possible connections that can happen there. We have a couple of rail lines that cross over sections. We look at creekways. We look at all the potential ways that trail can be connected, but also you can develop more parks and open space, whether it's like a homeowners association that ended up with some property and floodways, for example. That property may have water quality protection characteristics. And so finding ways to manage that property for those conservation benefits is important. And it's something that you really only find out about. You can see it on a map, but you've got to see it in person. And I'll say that's one of the things that we work really hard on, is being on site and knowing the particular pieces of property along the way. We spend a lot of time on the land and trying to understand it and think about how we and all of our project partners can help to contribute to the protection of that land or the connectivity of those trail segments.
Yeah. And I want to pull up a series of slides here that really kind of exemplifies the fact that it really isn't just Garry. I mean, this is a lot of people are involved in this, and here's the Trail Plan Steering Committee. I see several names on there that I recognize, and it does stretch across that entire network of folks. You also have an equity task force. Talk a little bit about what's going on with this group.
Yes. So one of the very first things that we did is we were working toward finding the good alignments for the trail itself, was to spend a lot of time thinking about, and the amazing assistance of this group to help us to understand the consequences of this sort of infrastructure development. And so this group developed some recommendations for us around planning and design and placemaking and economic opportunity, and as an overarching recommendation, recognizing that the springs themselves are sacred. They have sacred qualities and characteristics, and our perspective of them, for me as someone that's been a Texan in my life, is even very different from someone whose family has been here for thousands of years. And so those recommendations, then we pulled into the slide that you saw before, the actual developing the trail plan itself. And it's helped us to make sure that we're asking the right questions. Most importantly, make sure that we're listening as the community is talking and different people are expressing their perspectives on what the trail means to them, what the springs mean to them, and then working to incorporate that into everything that we do. If you can go back, John, to the slide that has the rock art on it.
Oh, yeah. Let's see if I can find that. This one, right?
Yeah. I just want to say one thing about this, that
yeah.
People have been using these springs to support their existence since there have been people here. And so that connection of the people in these springs is just deeply, deeply intertwined. And we feel that today in the communities that have been built up around them. But it goes even deeper than that. These springs do have sacred qualities. There is a group of people, the Coaltecans, whose origin as people came from San Marcos Springs. They arose on the earth through San Marcos Springs itself. And so we respect that and we honor that, and we're doing our very best to make sure that those stories are told and that people have an understanding of that level of importance of these springs. Yeah.
Very, very well said. All right, Garry, you're back. We just had a little adjustment in background there. But I wanted to pull up this slide too, because it continues that conversation of it really does take a village and quite a few villages when you're doing something across nearly 100 miles. Talk a little bit about the land and trail partners.
There is amazing work that's being done and has been done up and down our corridor for a long time by the people that are on this slide, organizations on this slide, and several others. So for us at Great Springs Project, we have a regional vision of connecting both from the trail side and also from the conserved land side. But our work is only as good and strong as our project partners. And so we have the regional vision, but the work done locally is being done through these organizations and these people. We help to support that work, we help to catalyze that work, and we help to point that work to the right and to the left. So one of the things that we did fairly early, we convened a group, we call them Trail Connects, where we had in each of the 4 counties in which we work, we had someone from a nonprofit that was doing trail or land conservation, but especially trail. And then we had someone from the public agency side, either a city or a county in that county, and talking about their projects and we were asking them, would your project be better supported, more interesting, if you were pointed towards something else, if San Antonio trails were pointed toward New Braunfels, and if New Braunfels trails were pointed to San Antonio and to San Marcos and on. And we got feedback from that and an understanding of the group that if we can collaborate and we can work together, we can take these 15 trail segments that we've talked about and have them be a place-to-place segment that benefits both ends of that, and then on and on. So that really led into the trail plan that we've helped to develop, and now the trail implementation that we're working on.
So when you're working within these different counties and different cities, how does that relationship sort of work and sort of play out pragmatically and logistically? And I'm sure it varies from municipality to municipality. But what does that sort of look like in terms of that interaction?
Yeah, I say there are three things that we really focus on there. The first is really listening to understand. And that can be an overused expression, but we work really hard to understand what are the priorities in each community, and understanding that each community is wildly different from the community that's right next door to it. And the priorities are different, the process is different, the opportunities are different. But in each place, there's nothing more important to that place than what they have right there on the ground. So really trying to understand that. And then building that level of trust that says, here are your priorities, here are our priorities, what's the overlap, and let's figure out ways to work together in where those priorities overlap for the benefit of everyone. And then the third thing that we work really hard at is to be the gap filler. So we're a 501c3. We do some convening. We've worked on building the trail plan, but we're also transactional based. And so whatever needs to happen to make a particular deal work, it's likely that we can find a role to help to facilitate that. It might be to find a funding source. It might be to put project partners together. It might be that they need technical expertise for GIS work or mapping or design or legal or land conservation professionals or something else. But we try to understand what the need is and then find the resources to fill it with an end goal of getting the project done. That is, for us, there's no ego, nothing. We want to get the deals done. We want to get the right-of-way secured. We want to get the trail built. We want to get land in conservation. That's the most and only thing that's important to us.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull up your most recent newsletter from September 2022 here. So the fall newsletter. And right off the bat, really, honing in on that this is your mission to be able to make this happen. And so you're talking about what you're trying to do now is to put land into conservation and get trail on the ground. And talking about this particular recent acquisition. And so this really emphasizes the fact that in many cases, in many opportunities, you're pulling together the funds, you're leveraging funds, you're doing whatever you can to actually get land into conservation. For people who don't really understand what we're talking about here, can you kind of in legalese and non-real estate jargon, can you kind of just walk us through what you're buying up land and doing what with it? Okay,
I'll do that, John. Do you have a buzzer? So if I fall into if I say anything in Latin, just to buzz me, okay? So the paragraph above that, putting land and conservation trail on the ground, I say that's the strategic plan for Great Springs Project has 2 lines, 2 sentences, and those are the only 2. Put land and conservation, put trail on the ground. I mean, that's what we exist for.
Yeah.
But the how to do it part, this Presa Grande project is really a great example of that. So we call it Presa Grande, this property Presa Grande, because there's a very large flood control dam on it. And there's a series of dams that were built by the Army Corps of Engineers a number of years ago, along in the Sink Creek area, just west of San Marcos, and several branches of Sink Creek that really catch a lot of water and then push water straight toward the city of San Marcos, Spring Lake, the springs themselves, and then ultimately into the San Marcos River. So this property had been 844 acres. It had been for sale at various times over the years. It had been under contract to be purchased a couple of different times. Because of its proximity to the city of San Marcos, and that it has some open space, some flat space, very developable land, and 2 branches of Sink Creek on it, it's really been looked at by real estate developers for a subdivision. And it has there's a lot of development around it. A lot of single family houses have been built right around this property. After I came on board and we looked at it again, it was under contract to be purchased by a developer, and that deal fell through. And so we were in the wings, and as soon as it did, we made an offer. We, Great Springs Project, made an offer to buy the property, and that offer was accepted. And so then we started to work on how to build the financing around that project to move it into conservation.
Okay.
So we found some people that wanted to invest in the property, and they wanted to own the property themselves for recreational purposes, which was great. And they wanted to keep it mainly whole and use it for a hunting operation and a weekend ranch for themselves and their families, which is perfect for a property like this.
Okay.
So we worked with them on an agreement on their behalf to the vast majority of that property, put a conservation easement over the vast majority of that property, to donate a trail easement on 2 sides of that property to Hays County in exchange for Hays County providing funding for the conservation easement. We worked with the Edwards Aquifer Authority to provide some funding to be able to do some research on the property in exchange for money that was used for fencing. And then there's a small portion of that property along a roadway that really doesn't have many conservation features on it, that really was better suited for single family houses. And so worked with the investors to develop 10 acre lots to be home sites to help to subsidize the cost of buying the property and moving it into conservation. There's a phase 2 of that will involve the city of San Marcos, we hope, and to acquire another piece of it for conservation. But that really is reflective of, for us, bringing quite a few different groups together with the common goal of conservation and a recreation opportunity for trails, and then making the financing part of it work for everyone. So now the landowner's happy. Hays County has trail easements. We're going to help with that on getting the trail built. A really important part of a chunk of Sink Creek is protect. Instead of 600 homes, it will have 10 homes on it. And those 10 homes are nowhere close to any kind of conservation resources.
Fantastic. And I see here that one of your trail planners, Kenny, is working on getting out there and hiking in through here and flagging it out and trying to figure out where the trail should go. Will this be a natural surface trail or a paved trail? This one,
it's going to be primarily natural surface trail. Okay. It really is well suited for that. There are a couple of topographical features that are going to need something that's a little more hardy, a little more burly to get up and down, some small features, but it'll be natural soft top trail the rest of it.
Okay, very good. And I see here that there's an opportunity to actually for the community to donate to help towards the trailhead. What's kind of happening here?
Yeah, this was another really interesting feature of this property that a number of years ago, one of the roads that it passes right in front of the property had been slightly relocated. And as a result, there are right around 3 acres right on the corner of this property that make a perfect trailhead. And it's sort of an orphan piece of property that's surrounded by other places. And so, again, with Hays County and with some funders, to develop that as the perfect trailhead right on the corner of the property. Then from there, to be able to get on the trail and then move around the property. So that we're generating support from the public. We have some foundational support for that as well. And then, and we'll continue to help to develop that because we're super happy to have the land in conservation, and we're super happy to have the trail easement. And what we really want is to have a trail built that people can use. So we'll continue to work on it to get a trail on the ground that people can use.
And hopefully one that people don't have to drive to to be able to use it as well.
That is right. And to that end, let me say that once we didn't know this was happening until it was happening, but once that project was moving forward, a couple of the neighbors came forward with some opportunities of their own. And so there's a strong potential to connect that trail on that Presa Grande property to other trail, and then eventually into the city of San Marcos's public trail system, which would be remarkable.
Yeah. So as I alluded to, I just got back from some international travel. I was in the Netherlands, as well as spent a little bit of time in Belgium and a little bit of time in France, in Paris. But one of the things that I love so much about traveling in the Netherlands is the ability to very easily on my bike just be able to get on a pathway and really quite quickly be out into the rural countryside. And they have just this fantastic network of trails, connecting village to village, city to city. And so I had to think of you. I was just like, it's like, this is kind of what this is. But one of the things that I noted is, and I grew up on a ranch in Northern California, so I understand the rural context and ranch land and things of that nature. But when I'm on my bike and I'm rolling past, all of these wonderful farms there in the Dutch countryside, and I'm just thinking, this is so cool that, these easements have been, created and they're facilitating, active mobility. And it's just so cool because especially with the proliferation of electric assist, we're seeing older and older and older people continuing to remain active. They're getting out on their electric assist bikes and they're in their 70s and 80s and 90s. And it's so incredible to see because they're just soaking up that rural environment, that, nature. So I thought about you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, John. I that's one of the things I really do wish that more people would have the opportunity to see what the opportunities are, to be in places like that where there has been the right of way secured and the trail built, and people can use it. All people can use it for whatever they want to use it for. And you see those places where those trails are so well used and so well loved, and so much just an integral part of people's daily lives. And we should have that in Texas. We can have that in Texas, and we're working really hard to bring that to Texas.
I get the sense that what you're doing here in this project could be duplicated many times over throughout Texas if we can just kind of work through any challenges and any tensions that sort of exist of that public and private, use, or it's really public use of private land and or private adjacent land.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, this Austin to San Antonio trail network, we really are looking at it as a spine. We have been talking with people that are working on trails and thinking about how to connect their trails to this trail from Bernie and Kendall County to Seguin, east and west and north and south of this Austin to San Antonio corridor. And then you look at some other regional trails that are either happening or have been contemplated around Texas. And there's great potential if we can continue this work and find some transformational changes to the way we think about trails and public, this kind of active transportation component, and then find the funding for it and continue to prioritize it the way we have been. We may look up in a few years and just see a remarkable change in this state for the better for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I know that some segments of the trail are in place. Where are we at in terms of number of miles and percentages and that sort of thing?
The way that we develop the alignments for the trail itself, with this steering committee of people that were already involved in building trails in their community and in their county, was by looking at all of the plans that we could find that had trail in them in some way. So city parks and open space plans and trails plans and transportation plans, long-term transportation plans, thoroughfare plans, everything that, and even talking with the real estate developers themselves that are doing master plan communities and looking at their development agreements to see where they had trails and parks. So through those, we sifted through all those with the steering committee and figured out, okay, this plan is really happening, and this one is never going to happen, and part of this one will and not. So through that, we really worked to use the things that were already being promoted and worked on locally. Then we found the gaps, and the gaps are something that we at Great Springs Project are taking on, finding those ways to connect. So when you look at our trail plan that's on our website at this past April, you'll see the maps that actually show the alignments, and it will reference the particular plan that it comes from. So you can see the city of New Braunfels may have a Dry Comb Out Creek plan. San Marcos has their plan. So to answer your question better, of the 100 plus miles of the trail network, over a third of that is already on the ground with just the trails that are being built. And looking at projects that are on the short-term time horizon from transportation plans and these park plans, there's roughly another third of it that is right away is either secured or being secured to do it. And so that leaves about a third of it for us to be out doing our land conservation projects and our trail right-of-way acquisition project to secure that right-of-way to connect all those things.
I love it.
Our timeline is, we say the Alamo to the capital by 2036.
Okay.
But we really want to get it done sooner.
Right. So cool. So cool. Garry, it's been such an honor and pleasure chatting with you. Is there any final nugget you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, John, I want to say again, thank you so much for having it. It's really a great opportunity to talk about our work, but also really enjoy hearing your perspective on the project. What I'll ask you and ask anyone is, if you think that there's something that we can do better, if you have an idea, if there's something you'd like to do to help, this is a big collaborative project. And so please reach out to us. You can look at our website and there's a contact tab there. You can sign up for our newsletter at greatspringproject.org. We do have social media, follow that. But please engage with us, because there's room in this project for everyone. And it's going to take all of us working together to make this happen the way that it should.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I'm going to pull back just a little bit so everyone can see that website again. Again, that is greatspringsproject.org. Garry Merritt, thank you so very much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast. It's been such a pleasure having you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Garry Merritt. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and be sure to ring the notifications bell next to the subscription button so you can customize your notification preferences. And also, if you are enjoying this content, I'd be honored to have you become an Active Towns ambassador. It's super, super easy. You can buy me a coffee. You can become a patron on our Patreon account. It's all available at activetowns.org, the website. Just go there. Also, there's a tab for the Active Towns store, so you can pick up your own Streets Are For People swag there. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in. It means so much to me. And until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers. Hey, also want to send a very special thank you to all my amazing Active Towns ambassadors out there who are directly supporting my efforts through Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, the YouTube Super Thanks, as well as purchases from the Active Towns store and making donations to the nonprofit. I simply could not do this without you. So again, thank you so very much.